Yeah, so we're back with Councillor Tim Heenan.
Yeah, Tim, with government assistance, you got the three tiers of government, local, state and federal. Presuming with local government, there's not a lot of money in any slush fund or anything to have, say, emergency accommodation built or anything like that, so you rely on agencies. But what about state and federal government? What sort of things are they doing?
Yeah, look, obviously starting with the federal government, there was a white paper put out a couple of years ago which talks about a vision of ending homelessness, and that requires obviously sustained long-term efforts from all the levels of government and the not-for-profit sector. They're saying that homelessness is everyone's responsibility, and as I said before, it certainly is a way of life now. Probably thinking, well, how can that be? Well, it is. It's a way of life for over 100,000 Australians every year. The Australian government, obviously with the agreement of state and territory governments, has set two headline goals to guide us over the long-term response. That means to 2020, they believe they can halve homelessness in Australia. They also talk about offering supported accommodation to all rough sleepers who need it by the same year. Well, look, I don't want to be a pessimist, but geez, I tell you what, they better get their skates on to get something going, because when you drill down from federal government to state to local government, we really need a lot more assistance, both on the ground and financial, to be able to change areas of the planning scheme so we can offer more opportunities for developers to build affordable housing. Certainly you've got to set the environment so that people and agencies can come along and do that. You can't just say, well, here we are, come and build it. The important thing to remember in all of this too is that all governments will set targets of things they want to do, but when you look at the numbers of people that are homeless around Australia, and look, I'll obviously stick to the Yarra Valley and the Shire of Yarra Ranges, we know from what we know that statistics that were collected by the Australian Bureau of Statistics in the 2001 census and the 2006 census, that there was already an increase of 22%. Right. So if you look at that again in the 2011 census, that's quite frightening.
And the rarer something is, the more it costs. We were talking about rental accommodation before. I know from real estate agents that when a rental property comes up, the longest it lasts is half a day. Sometimes it only lasts a few hours and it's gone again. There's such a huge waiting list. So people who need it just can't get it.
You're right, Greg. And look, if you've got people on the books and you're a real estate agent, you can be forgiven for thinking, well, I've got two people here with excellent references, certainly both in working and have the bond and everything to be afforded that. So where does a homeless person sit? Well, they're so far down the ladder, it's like playing snakes and ladders. You get to position 99, you go back to position 4. They can't even come up anywhere near the requirements needed to be able to fit the bill to get those rental accommodations.
And even other types of accommodations that they could scratch up. I know from experience living in a cabin in a caravan park for 6 months. It's not cheap. They're rare to come across. I was lucky to get it. And when you're in those sort of situations, you're only a payday away from losing it anyway. Yeah, so there's very little alternatives.
Correct. And even furthermore to that, in the olden days, and I remember this when my mum and dad rented, you didn't have to come up with 1 month bond for the gas or 1 month bond for the electricity or 2 months rent in advance or all of this. But you need all of that now. Agencies like Anchor do the best they can, and Anglicare, they have money available to be able to help with some of it, but the onus falls back on the person there, and unfortunately there isn't the money coming even from state government to be able to help them just get off that first base to get back in a home.
So it's a really marginalisation of citizens, citizens that are just as worthwhile as any other citizen. And it makes you wonder about our democracy. It makes me wonder about our democracy a little bit, because we all participate, and if we're marginalised and we're forced into a position where we can't participate, surely we need to fund people to be able to be part of society.
There's many gaps now in the world that they're looking at between the haves and the have-nots, and the gap is widening even more. Anything that happens in our community where we live needs a community response. Unfortunately, if we turn our back on all of these things, we're really turning our back on what we're living in and who we're living with. The future in many countries of the world won't be about a global global situation. It actually will be about a local situation where you live with your family, your friends, your community. They're going to be the most important things. And all of these issues that exist in society are going to come back to bite us in such a big way that we will have to deal with them. And the lack of housing, the fact that some homeless people are not even considered in the statistics yet, we have to keep it on the front burner.
And the stigma attached with being categorised as homeless is widespread through society. And you can say, well, why don't they do something for themselves instead of waiting on the government, you know? It's very hard for you when you're homeless to be able to improve your life. The first step people would look at is, get a job, then you'll have money, you know? So you go to an employment agency or whatever, or you door knock businesses, and the first thing they find out about you is, no fixed address. You haven't even got a mobile phone because you can't afford the credit for it. How are we going to contact you, you know? So straight away you're getting knocked further and further down the pecking order, and you've got no hope there. They just can't get the breaks, you know?
You're right, Greg. Conversations I've had in the last 8 days of being homeless with some of the homeless people, the only way they can get Centrelink payments, not having a fixed address, is by having an address where they're paying someone a considerable amount of money to use their address to put on the forms.
Right.
It's on a merry-go-round then, really. You've got to pay those money, because if you haven't got an address, Centrelink are not going to deal with you at all.
Right. Okay.
According to what we know, 44% of people are staying temporarily with friends and relatives. 21% are living in boarding houses and other temporary accommodation. Some of those, 19% find a bed in the homeless service system. Now, what that means is that obviously at any given time throughout the year, they can manage to get through some of these agencies to help. And then the last 16% in the equation are the ones that are sleeping rough. Now, let's watch those statistics when the census comes out next year, because we're going to see a marked increase in them.
And we hear a lot about the danger that can happen when you're sleeping rough. How have you found it, Tim?
Look, obviously the last couple of days have been a little bit difficult. Saturday and Sunday had challenges connected with it. I must confess, on Saturday, I started off in late afternoon all right, because I had about 20-odd young people in the park, and obviously cooking barbecues and being fairly rowdy, but there were situations that broke out, and I won't go into all of them. Suffice to say, they were a little bit dangerous. I noted a little bit later in the night I was being intimidated a little bit, and also obviously at a time that I didn't know, later on the night, my car was being jimmied open one of the doors to get into some of the things I had inside there. Last night was worse, as you well know, Greg. My mobile phone was stolen from me, and I had to pay $100 to get that back. Otherwise, I would have lost it. That was a fairly volatile situation, and it needed an alternative measure in suggesting a reward for the finder, and clearly I had no other option. I certainly did not want to involve the police, understanding the circumstances of what I was doing in the park, and knowing that full well, had I done that, I would have been there would have been ramifications with some of the people I was dealing with. I didn't want that either, for all the right reasons, so I chose to offer a reward, in inverted commas, I must say, and I got my phone back. So the experience of the last 48 hours has not been good.
You, being a male, go through these threatening situations, so it must be very bad for a woman.
It is too, and one of the main long-term people connected with the park there, and I won't mention any names, has fallen on hard times in days gone by, because of course where she sleeps in a particular area is frequented by drug users, and of course they're fairly aggro when they get interrupted, and as was the case a couple of weeks ago, it was related to me a few nights ago, where she was belted up, only because she was coming back to sleep in an area where she slept months and months and months previous, but she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and of course she was physically abused.
Assaulted,
Yes.